a 4,000-year-old clay prism, records 8 kings who ruled ancient Sumer for a combined 241,000 years before a single flood wiped the slate clean. Averaged out, that's roughly 30,000 years apiece. How does anyone reign for tens of thousands of years? And why did the scribes who wrote it down believe every word? The prism that took its own history. Seriously, the object at the center of this mystery is called the Weld Blundell Prism, a 4-sided column of clay, roughly the size of a rolled-up newspaper, covered edge to edge in cuneiform script, and kept today in Oxford's Ashmolean Museum. It was written somewhere around 1800 BC, and it does something no other ancient document quite dares to do. It lists the kings of Sumer in unbroken order, starting from the exact moment its scribes say kingship first descended from heaven, all the way down to a real, historically documented ruler named Sin-Magir, who sat on the throne in the 1820s BC. Most of that list is mundane. Real cities, real dynasties, reign lengths that make ordinary human sense. Then you hit the opening section, the kings who ruled before the flood, and the numbers stop making sense entirely. When years stopped behaving like years. The first king on the list, a ruler of the city of Eridu, is credited with a reign of 28,800 years. The next lasted even longer. By the time you reach a king named Enmen-Luana, the tablet claims he sat on the throne for 43,200 years alone, longer than the entire span of recorded human civilization. Add up all 8 antediluvian kings, and you get 241,200 years of continuous rule, according to the most complete surviving copy. Other fragments of the same list disagree with each other on the exact numbers. One version puts the total closer to 456,000 years, and a much later Greek retelling by a Babylonian priest named Berossus lands on 432,000, though his version tells the story with 10 kings instead of 8, and gives some of them different names and cities entirely. So the totals, and even the cast of characters, shift from source to source. What doesn't shift is the underlying shape, impossibly long reigns, followed by a flood that ends them all at once. The math hiding inside the madness. Here is where it gets stranger instead of simpler. Sumerian scribes did not count in tens the way we do. Their entire number system ran on a base of 60, and it gave them specific words for specific blocks of time. A unit called a sar meant 3,600, a ner meant 600, a soss meant 60. When the tablet says a king reigned for a certain number of sars and ners, it is not exaggerating in vague round numbers the way a modern storyteller might say 1,000 years. It is doing precise arithmetic in a counting system built for astronomy and grain storage, then applying that same precision to human lifespans that should have been physically impossible. That single detail is what convinces some researchers this was never meant as poetic exaggeration. Whoever wrote this genuinely believed they were recording exact figures. Why a real king would fake this kind of history. The list was not carved by mistake or by ignorant scribes guessing at the past. Many scholars who have studied it argue it was composed under a very real, very political dynasty, established by a king named Utu-Hegal, who took back control of Sumer from a foreign occupying power in the years around 2050 BC. A newly independent kingdom needs a story that makes its rule feel inevitable, and stretching your dynasty's roots back tens of thousands of years, all the way to the moment the gods themselves handed kingship to your city, is one of the oldest political tricks in human history. The flood section was likely added afterward, stitched onto the front of an existing dynasty list to explain why kingship had to move from one city to the next. A physical migration the prism actually tracks from Eridu to Bad Tabira, then Larak, then Sippar, then finally Shuruppak, before the flood erases all 5. In that reading, the impossible reign lengths were never really about age. They were about legitimacy, a way of saying that authority itself has existed since the beginning of time and simply passes from ruler to ruler, never disappearing. The theory that turns millennia into ordinary lifespans. Not everyone is satisfied with a purely political explanation, and one theory in particular keeps resurfacing because it is almost disturbingly elegant. What if the word being translated as year never meant a full solar year at all? Some researchers have proposed dividing these reign lengths by 360 or 365, treating each unit as closer to a single day than a full orbit around the sun. Run that math against Enmen Luana's 43,200 years, and you land on a reign of roughly 120 years, still extraordinary for a Bronze Age ruler, but no longer physically impossible. It is a tidy fix, and it would explain everything, except no one has ever found a Sumerian text that actually defines the unit that way. The theory survives because it is satisfying, not because it has been proven, and that gap between satisfying and proven is exactly where this mystery keeps breathing. A flood that shows up in two places at once. Whatever these numbers actually mean, every version of the list agrees on what stops them. A flood arrives, kingship is swept away, and when it descends from heaven again afterward, it lands in a different city with a different dynasty. That structure should sound familiar, because a flood that erases one age of humanity and starts another is also the exact shape of the biblical deluge that follows Genesis. Scholars have known for well over a century that Genesis draws on older Mesopotamian material, but the detail people miss is smaller and stranger than the flood itself. The patriarchs in Genesis, before that flood, also live for impossible lengths of time, hundreds of years each, before the ages of biblical figures shrink dramatically right after the water recedes. Two separate ancient cultures, writing centuries apart, both landed on the same pattern. Impossibly long lives before the flood, ordinary human lifespans after it. Nobody has ever fully explained why that pattern shows up twice, and other copies of this same king list tradition don't just gesture at the connection. They name the man standing at the center of it. The last king, before the water. The Weld Blundell Prism's antediluvian section ends with a king named Ubaratutu, ruler of Shuruppak, the fifth and last of the 5 cities before the flood, and then simply states that the flood swept over everything. Its other manuscripts of the king list, along with a separate text known as the Sumerian flood story, that fill in what happened next. In those versions, Ubaratutu's son is the man who survives what comes after, a figure the tablets call Ziusudra, warned by a god to build a boat while everyone else drowns. That name should sound familiar if you've watched this channel before. Ziusudra is the same flood survivor who shows up later as Utnapishtim, and later still, in a text written 1,000 years after this prism, as Noah, which means the flood hero at the center of an entirely different legend isn't a separate character, borrowed from nowhere. Across this wider tradition, he's remembered as the son of the last king, to reign before the water arrives. The king the list didn't invent. That connection isn't the only place where this document turns out to be more grounded than it looks. A handful of names further down the list, kings who sound just as legendary as the antediluvian rulers, were later tied to real historical figures once archaeologists began digging up independent inscriptions bearing their names. Gilgamesh, listed as a king of Uruk with a suspiciously long reign of his own, was long assumed to be pure legend until his name turned up on artifacts completely unconnected to this list. Mainstream Assyriology stops short of calling that settled proof. What exists is a handful of later inscriptions and building attributions, not a contemporary record confirming he personally lived, but most historians now treat Gilgamesh as likely historical rather than purely mythical. That shift alone rewired how scholars read the entire document. If the list buried a probable real king, inside centuries of exaggeration. Once, the uncomfortable question becomes how many other names on that list are doing the exact same thing, hiding a real person underneath a reign length nobody can take literally. What the prism actually leaves unanswered. Put all of this together, and the honest picture is messier than either side of the debate wants to admit. The reign lengths are almost certainly not literal solar years. The political motive behind the list is well documented, and the flood section was very likely a later addition designed to serve a very real dynasty's claim to power. But the specific choice of numbers, the exact match to a base 60 counting system, and the strange echo inside a completely separate Genesis flood story, none of that fully disappears just because the political motive is real. Sometimes the most unsettling artifacts are not the ones hiding a secret on purpose. They are the ones where the explanation and the mystery sit right next to each other on the same four-sided piece of clay. And there is one more name further down, that same prism, a king listed centuries after the flood, with a reign length that should be ordinary and is not. We'll get into exactly who he was and why his numbers still do not add up in the next video.